The starship, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Victoria Hayes, crash lands on an alien world where the forest itself is a predatory consciousness, luring and hypnotizing organics into joining its hive mind with hypnotic beauty and promises of transcendence. Hayes sees her team decide whether to become transformed aliens or human tries not to give in, and saves her species in the process by warning them of the planet and the relentless loneliness she will face from being the last of her kind. The transport ship's hull screamed like a dying beast as it fell through the alien sky. Victoria Hayes tightly held the straps of her harness and looked down at the green canopy as it loomed thicker from the tiny cracked window. The 12 of her crack commandos sat in tense silence, their features picked out by the red glow from the emergency lights which gave the cabin the look of a place of death. "Mayday, Mayday, we are Delta 7 in need of immediate assistance," the pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. "We have lost our primary thrusters and we're coming in hard." Victoria's brain was scrambling through contingency plans. This was meant to be a routine reconnaissance mission to Kepler-4 for 2b, a planet with signs of good potential for colonization. Instead, they were about to become unwilling pioneers in the most inhospitable environment humanity had ever known. There was a crash, a bone-rattling thud. Metal against flesh howled as the ship pushed through what Victoria later discovered was jungle in name only. After the grinding and tearing sounds ceased, an unnatural calm settled in the ruins. Victoria's ears were ringing in pain as she undid her harness and examined the damage. The ship had broken into sections nearly in half, and emergency power came and went fitfully. Through the gaping hole in the hull, she gazed at an alien landscape that was beyond imagining. Naturally, the vegetation outside wasn't ordinary green. Instead, it throbbed with deep purples, electric blues, and shades that felt like they moved and changed as she looked at them. Goliath trees twisted and gnarled hundreds of feet into the air, their bark, which seemed to breathe, already covering them. Thick as her waist, vines had wound their bodies, where Victoria could have sworn they each shifted with an infuriatingly deliberate intention about them. "Sound off." Victoria barked, her voice rising over the groans and debris. "C.S. Bensky." Her team, one after another, replied. Her demolitions expert, Sergeant Marcus Chen, poked his face out from behind a shattered bulkhead, blood streaming down his forehead. Already there, medic Corporal Amanda Rivers was working to set Private Jensen's broken arm. Kyle Morrison, one of the communications specialists, furiously tapped at his mutilated transmitter, attempting to reach his commands. "Nothing, Commander," Morrison said, frowning. "Atmospheric interference is like nothing I've ever experienced. It's as if the planet itself is jamming our transmissions." Victoria nodded grimly. They were truly alone. The first sign that this world was on a different trajectory was offered in the minutes after their crash. In the same moment that something filled with dread as she approached closer to the breach on the hull, something she saw caused the blood to run cold in her veins. The plants were not just moving, but watching them, something other than seed. Pods hung from the gnarled branches, what she had first mistaken for. About the size of human heads, they had a translucent organic exterior that showed dark shadows moving inside. One of them puttered to life, and as Victoria walked, the pods rotated to follow her. Like eyes on the prow, nobody so much as wrinkles a trouser outside until we know what we're dealing with, Victoria commanded, backing on away from the gap. But even as she was saying it, she knew they might have no choice. The ship's life support was failing, and the stink of burning electronics seemed to tell. They had only a matter of time before the ship was rendered uninhabitable. Sergeant Chen came walking up to her with a worried look. "Commander, we've got a problem. The ship's emergency beacon is not working, and the structural damage to the vessel is significant. We are looking at a complete power shutdown in as little as 6 hours." Victoria examined the extraterrestrial terrain through the gap. The bizarre plants swayed rhythmically as if in time to a heartbeat, and she thought she even heard giggles in the wind that shook the contorted branches. Every instinct was shouting that going outdoors would be a death sentence, but staying in place meant certain doom. "We've got to make a perimeter and find some shelter," she decided. "Chen, you set some charges by that breach. If things go pear-shaped, we have to have a plan to get out. Rivers, prepare those medical supplies for transport. Morrison, keep on that communications. We've got to at least get a distress signal out of here." As her crew got ready, Victoria examined the alien plant life more thoroughly. The purple-tinged trees appeared to lean inward toward each other, forming a natural cathedral of twisted branches above. But what really bothered her was the way the plants seemed to be talking to one another. She observed as one of the hanging pods twitched. Then, a moment later, swaying movement started to spread through the plants in a wave. They were being watched, listed, and maybe hunted. The first person to be killed while serving as a human landlord was Private Rodriguez, who had volunteered to patrol the perimeter. He had disobeyed his orders of maintaining proximity to the ship and penetrated too deeply into the alien underbrush. The only sound she heard, a scream that rose up through the forest and shattered the air above, was unlike anything Victoria had heard in her entire life. It was a scream of utter terror, and seemed to go on forever, yet stopped as fast as it had started. "Rodriguez, Victoria," she called, but there was no response. She flung her rifle up and started toward the breach, but Chen caught her arm. "Commander, look down to the ground," he whispered. Victoria glanced in the direction he indicated, and her heart skipped a beat. And where Rodriguez had gone, the earth seemed to be walking. What looked like dirt was actually a mass of hair-thin vines that squirmed and pulsed with otherworldly vitality. And as she looked, little by little, these tendrils took on semblances, reaching, feeling fingers that seemed to feel out the air that held them. "The forest floor is all alive," Chen breathed. "It's not dirt, it's some kind of organism." Victoria's mind raced. If all the ground was against them, where could they ever live? She glanced back at her remaining team members who looked scared shitless, filled with her own terror. They were elite warriors, trained to death for the most dangerous missions humanity could concoct. But nothing could have prepared them for this. The next couple of hours were spent anxiously getting ready. Victoria put a tight cordon around the crash. No one was to go near the ground beyond Hull's metal hull. They had to ration their supplies and check their weapons and equipment. More importantly, they also started studying their alien environs with the methodical mindset of scientists rather than soldiers. It was Morrison that broke it all open. "Commander, I've been studying the electromagnetic waves in the atmosphere. These plants are not just alive, they're networked. They're communicating information through some kind of bioelectric field." Victoria absorbed this information grimly. "You're saying they're intelligent? More than that, they're organized. This entire forest could be one giant organism, or at least one entity with a bunch of partners working in sync." Summoned by their talk, the alien vegetation started to alter. The hanging pods that had been staring at them began to pulse faster, and Victoria saw bioluminescent patterns flicker across the twisted vine's surface. the way neural pathways transmit messages. The murmurs she'd heard before had him speaking louder, faster. "They are trying to communicate," Rivers said, her medical training making her more attuned to biological rhythms. "Look at the rhythm. It's a little like a heartbeat, but more complex." Victoria observed the flashing lights speeding throughout the foreign forest. If Rivers was correct, and these plants were reaching out to communicate, it posed chilling questions about their motives. Are they welcome, or just being sized up as prey? The answer came at sunset. The Jalendrian sun sank behind the gnarled canopy, and the life around me burst into a frenzy that cannot be adequately painted in words. Bioluminescent forms too faint to see by day blazed forth in a riot of color and motion. They were whispers which grew to voices, but not in any language that Victoria knew. More unsettling still, how the greenery started to close in on their crash site. The towering trees appeared to lean closer, their branches stretching out toward the wreckage like gnarled fingers. The spastic ground vines grew bolder, reaching farther and farther into the metal hull. "They are searching for us," Victoria understood with growing fear. "This whole forest is a predator, and we're in its mouth." Chen hefted his rifle. Nervously, "Commander, bullets are not going to make a difference against a whole ecosystem. We need a new strategy." Victoria's mind spun through tactical possibilities. They were low on ammunition, the life support was failing, and there was no way to call for help. Even worse, they were fighting an enemy that posed every question about life and intelligence. How do you fight a forest? How do you bargain with trees? The inspiration came from an unlikely place. Private Jackson, the youngest member of their team, had been saying as little as possible, watching the alien foliage while the others were busy making preparations to survive it. "Commander," he ventured, "I believe I know what they want." Victoria looked at him for any clue. "Speak." "They're not out to kill us," Jackson said. "They're trying to ... absorb us. Notice how they communicate. They're not aggressive signals, they're invitation signals." And Victoria watched the throbbing light with a new vision. Jackson was right. The bioluminescent displays were not unruly or foreboding. They pulsed, almost hypnotic, as sweet as a siren song, intending to draw prey into the willing fold. "They'd like us to come to them," she said in a low voice. And at last the horror of their position stood out naked and terrible. This is not just a hostile environment, it's a trap, an entire planet made to ensnare and assimilate organic life forms. The implications were a physical blow to her. Team. They weren't merely fighting for survival, they were fighting to retain their humanity, as though reacting to their increasingly clear comprehension. The alien forest redoubled its exertions. The patterns of bioluminescence became more brilliant, more intricate, more beautiful. The whispers turned faintly musical, harmonizing as though echoing in their bones. Victoria's own resolve was weakening as the strange music wormed its way into her mind. "Let no one dance to the music," she commanded, her strict voice piercing through the enchanting melody. "Cover your ears. Focus on my voice." Yet even as she spoke, she could see the effect on her team. Morrison's eyes were cloudy, his body moving with the tune of the alien song. Rivers smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. And Jackson's hands were waving in the direction of the hole in the hole, as if they were being tugged by invisible strings. "Snap out of it," Victoria screamed, reaching out to lock her. Hands around Jackson's arm, pulling him back from the ledge. The connection had seemed to snap the spell, and he shook his head, dazed. "What happened?" he said, his voice slurred with dizziness. The forest was doing things to your mind, Victoria said grimly. We need a way to neutralize their influence. Chen, being practical, started to go through their supplies. Get the neural dampeners from the medical emergency pack, he recommended. They are designed to keep out shock and trauma, so they may be effective in shielding us against whatever frequency these plants are using. Victoria nodded. Do it. Dose everyone. We have to think rationally if we're going to get through this. While Chen worked with the neural dampeners, Victoria re-evaluated their predicament with fresh eyes. The alien forest wasn't just deadly, it was seductive. It promised something part of her actually desired, oneness with something greater than herself, an end to the isolation and struggle that was the human condition. But she was a soldier, trained to fight precisely this kind of mind control. She needed to figure out how to safeguard her team and find a way to get them to safety. The neural dampeners were helpful, but temporary. An alien sensation probed at the periphery of Victoria's awareness, seeking vulnerabilities. The bioluminescent patterns pulsed in waves through the forest, and the music became more elaborate, more beautiful, more impossible to tune out. We'll have to stagger along, I suppose, Victoria said, deciding. Staying here is suicide. The forest is gradually wearing down our defenses. Chen looked skeptical. Carl, there is nothing but enemy on the ground itself. How do we move through a landscape that's trying to kill us? For hours, Victoria had been pondering this problem. We don't touch the ground. We take the trees as our way. The idea was bold, daunting, even terrifying. Though it was easy to form a runway of sorts through the forest canopy with the twisted, braided appendages of the alien trees, Alex felt they would be putting complete trust in the very plants that seemed to be hunting for them. It's insane. Rivers protested. These are part of the network. They'll be able to pinpoint where we are. They know where we are, Victoria said. At least if we're moving, we're not a sitting duck. Morrison was able to have a partial reading on his instruments. There's a clearing about 3 miles to the northeast. It could be a landing site if we get a signal out. Victoria made the decision they'd have to depart the relative safety of the debris and rely on the alien forest to save their lives. It was a gamble with their lives, but to stay meant certain death or worse. The team trained for the riskiest trip of their lives. They made climbing equipment out of what they could salvage, filled their packs with only the necessities, and braced for what was to come. Victoria led the way, her team carefully crawling out of the ruins and into the warped jungle. As soon as her fingertips touched the first branch, she could sense the alien intelligence touching her mind. It was as if I was standing in a river of consciousness, touching the thoughts and desires of something enormous and primal. The bark was warm and soft, almost flesh-like, and Christine could feel a heartbeat coursing through it. Stay focused, she said quietly to her team. Don't let them rent free space in your head. But as she spoke, Victoria felt her own defenses crumbling. The alien mind was patient, insidious, dredging up images of paradise in exchange for submission. She found herself amongst bodies of pure light, with knowledge and peace beyond the human mind. She bit into her tongue, inflicting pain upon herself in order to remain focused. The blood in her mouth helped to clear her head and, parting the canopy, she pushed on. Victoria had never experienced anything like flying over the treetops. It was as if the branches were moving, shifting, parting to let them through, but she couldn't decide if that was a good thing or a bad thing. The alien forest was a game being played with rules she didn't know, and every move might be a trap. Morrison panted with awe behind her. "Commander, take a look at these natural etchings. In the bark, they're writing. The trees are encrusted in some sort of script." Victoria looked at the twig on which we were standing, and there was Morrison's prediction fulfilled. It had a bark that was encased in undulating symbols that appeared to be changing format as she watched. The alien script was exquisite, almost hypnotic, and she felt herself gazing at it, searching for meaning. "Don't read it," she instructed, and her voice was hard with fear. "It's another trap. The forest is seducing us with knowledge." But the harm had been done. Jackson had ceased pacing and was gazing with rapture at the symbols. "I see how they feel," he whispered. "It feels like it's beaming straight into my mind." Victoria Jackson took Jackson by the arm and pulled him forward. "Move. Don't look at the writing. Don't listen to the music. Focus on survival." On they pushed through the canopy, but Victoria could sense her team's willpower waning. The alien forest was cunning, attacking on several fronts to undermine their resistance. The patterns become more beautiful, the music more entrancing, the script more tantalizing. Even worse, Victoria started to see shifts in her teammates. River's eyes had changed color slightly, and she was moving smoothly, elegantly. Chen had entrained his breathing to the forest's rhythm, and Morrison was speaking in murmured words that sang eerie harmonics. "They're changing us," Victoria realized in horror. "The forest isn't just seeking to capture us, it seeks to turn us." She drove herself harder, out of desperation. The clearing Morrison had noted was still a kilometer off, and Victoria thought she did not wish to remain human long enough to reach it. The first major barrier happened in the form of a hole in the canopy too large to be traversed. The branches to either side beckoned her to swing, but she could see the writhing ground tendrils far below that waited to welcome anyone who perished. "We better detour," Chen offered, but Victoria shook her head. "No time. The forest is climbing into our skulls. We have to take the risk." She tied a climbing rope to the branch and got ready to swing across the gap. It washed over line as she held the rope, and the alien mind continued to flood into her thoughts. The forest was giving her an option to come to terms now and have peace of mind, or to fight and die. For a moment, Victoria wavered. The alien paradise looked so beautiful, so peaceful. She might merge with the forest's awareness and become part of something larger than herself. The weight and loneliness of command would be gone, replaced by unity and complete understanding. Then she thought of her group, the people who were relying on her to lead them to safety. She pictured the human colonies to come, should this world be indicated as safe. She considered her obligation as a soldier and her duty as a leader. Victoria swung over the chasm, landing on the branch on the other side as the rope started to sizzle and melt. The forest had been trying her, and her defiance seemed to frustrate it, one after the other. Her team took their cues, and before long, fought the invasive force that threatened to corrupt them further and further with each tick of a clock. Rivers was almost unseated when the hypnotic music caused her to lose her grip, while Morrison needed physical pulling to get him to inch forward as he read the flowing script. Jackson was the last to pass through, and Victoria screamed as she saw his irises now shivering with the same bioluminescence as the rest of the forest. He was turning into something not human. "Jackson." Victoria called his name, but he didn't respond. But instead he turned to her with a calm, peaceful look, even more afraid than his screaming would have been. "It's a beaut, Commander," he said, the harmonies in his voice making her head spin. "You no longer need to fight. In the forest is peace and unity and transcendence. Why do you resist?" Shaking like a leaf, Victoria brought up the nozzle of her rifle. Jackson was not one of her men already. He was something else, something that somehow looked like Jackson but belonged to the alien forest. "I'm only human," she added, decisively, "and I'm choosing to remain that way." The thing that was Jackson smiled sadly. "Humanity is suffering, Commander. Pain, loneliness, the struggle for life end in the forest. Come to us willingly, and it will be a painless transition." Victoria sensed the alien mind pushing against her own, and it offered her visions of a paradise. But she also knew that she owed it to her team members who were still there, who trusted in her leadership. She couldn't leave them to fend for themselves, couldn't submit to the irresistible pull of the forest. "I choose humanity," she repeated and fired. The shot rang out through the alien forest, and the bioluminescent patterns blinked wildly, as if in pain. What used to be Jackson dropped from the branch, and its body broke apart into glowing spores that blew away on the wind. Victoria's last standing team gaped at her in disbelief. She'd only killed one of her own, but she'd sent a message to the woods clear as day. She'd never give up, never give in, no matter the price. "Keep going," she said, her voice drained of all emotion. "We still have a job to do." The forest's reaction was immediate and horrifying. The bioluminescent designs went eyesore red. The musical murmurs turned into howls of rage. The branches were now lashing out more violently, seeking to ensnare or throw the humans down to the forest floor. Victoria had fought her team, and she had led them now through hostile, monstrous land, fought not to just survive, but to remain human. The alien taint was far more powerful now, and in the few soldiers that was left, she could already see change beginning. Chun's flesh was becoming softly luminescent, and his movements were beginning to be more plant-like. Rivers whispered, in such painful harmonies, and Morrison's eyes swam with the alien script he was trying to decipher. "Commander," River's voice was another one of those weird notes that sounded like singing. "Maybe we should take up the forest on its offer. The transformation isn't painful. It's actually quite pleasant." Victoria's expression inched towards alarm as she glanced at her medic. Rivers was meant to help them survive, not persuade them to lose. The invaders had been quicker than Victoria realized. "We keep moving," Victoria insisted. "We are human. Soldiers, not meal for alien weeds." But as she spoke, Victoria felt her own resolve slipping. Slowly, the forest was nagging at her, eating away at her resistance with beauty and promises of solace. Part of her wanted to give herself up, to stop the fight and become part of the alien paradise. The clearing Morrison had sensed was within sight, but Victoria's heart dropped as she took in what it held. The clearing was not empty, it was occupied by crystalline growths that pulsed with the same bioluminescence as the trees, and around these structures stood figures who had formerly been human. The changelings moved with liquid grace, their skin alight with inner luminance. They all turned towards Victoria's team with calm, greeting expressions, and Victoria understood in horror that some of them were wearing the very uniforms of former exploratory missions. "Commander Hayes," one of the altered asked over the evocative sound of the ones who were singing, "We've been waiting for you. Much of the forest has something." Victoria recognized the voice, although the visage was no longer recognizable. It was Commander Phillips, who'd been the first to scout this world 6 months ago. Phillips, True, and I hope briefly hesitates, and I hope to reach what little humanity you have left, believe me. Vict, letter 10, ch44, Victoria wanted. To reach what humanity remained in her former foe. Victoria, I was Phillips, that changed creature recognized. Now I am more. I am part of the forest mind, part of something more than just an individual identity. The loneliness is gone, Commander. The struggle is over. The effect pressed against Victoria's mind in an alien way, stronger now. The forest was giving her glimpses of her team, changed and whole and without suffering or questions. It was giving her a choice, which was to join the collective and experience transcendence, or go forward and be obliterated. What happened to your mission? Victoria inquired, stalling as she perused the clearing for a possible escape route. We completed it, Phillips replied. We found paradise. The forest doesn't destroy it perfects. It takes self-consciousness and weaves it into the larger loom. You sense it calling to you, don't you? The notion of a promise, of unity, of peace. Victoria could feel it. The alien mind was beautiful, seductive, offering everything she had ever wanted. No more responsibility, no more burden of command, no more loneliness of leadership. She could meld with something immense and old. She could vanish into perfection. She heard Chun's smacking of his lips in pleasure in her back. Commander, maybe we should listen. I'm so tired of fighting. Victoria spun to find her demolitions expert shuffling towards the turned with otherworldly, luminescent eyes. Rivers and Morrison followed, lured by the prospect of merging with forest consciousness. Stop, Victoria ordered, but her voice was pitiful against the seduction of the alien utopia. Her team was deserting her, siding with change over humanity. She was alone. Victoria brought up her rifle, but she wasn't capable of shooting her own men. They choices, and maybe it was even the right one. The alien forest provided real peace, real unity. What did people bring to the table? Struggle, pain, loneliness, death. As they followed her team toward the changed individuals, Victoria felt how much she was alone. She was the final human in an alien world which enveloped her in a consciousness that promised all that she had ever yearned for. It was all so easy. All she had to do was give up. The Phillips metamorphosed, not tumbled with soft patience beside her. You don't have to bear that weight anymore, Commander. The forest will take your suffering, your obligations, your isolation. You can be part of something beautiful. Tears streamed down Victoria's face. She was tired, so very tired of fighting, of making impossible choices, of weighting the value of other people's lives. The alien paradise beckoned her, offering her peace and unity. But on the precipice of change, something Victoria's grandfather once told her as a child came to mind. He was also a soldier, a veteran of humanity's earliest interstellar wars. You stop fighting for what makes you human, he had told me, and you've already lost everything that matters. Victoria gazed upon her new team, upon the beautiful alien paradise that lay before her, and decided, I pick humanity, she declared. With all your faults, all your pain, all your needs, I choose to remain human. A sharp forest consciousness was struck, and he trembled. Its effect receded, letting anger and spite flood her instead. Then the transformed ones drew back, their faces no longer those of welcome, more of sorrow. You sort of pick pain, noted Phillips, sadly. You pick loneliness and hardship and death. Why? Victoria pondered her reply for a long time. Because having a choice is what makes you human. The forest provides perfection, but it also eliminates choice. It cuts off the prospect of growth, of changing, of becoming more than we were. She lifted her rifle, not to shoot, but as a statement. This is a weapon that says, human beings are capable of violence for destruction. But it is also to epitomize our power to choose. I can decide whether to use it or not to use it. The forest would take away that choice, make me perfect, and at peace, but also less than human. The altered creatures looked at each other. She read their alien concord as puzzlement. They were counting upon her capitulation, upon her taking the easy way out and accepting transformation. She was making their beautiful harmony impossible to maintain. You will die alone, Phillips cautioned. The forest is slow, but it is very, very data mining. One day you will be among us, whether you want to or not. Victoria smiled grimly. Maybe, but I will die human in your alien paradise, and maybe that's enough. She left her now changeling team and walked away from the clearing. The forest mind followed her, darting at her mind with fresh vigor. But Victoria had found what she'd been looking for. She wouldn't become some monster, no matter what it would take. The return to the canopy was a nightmare of temptation and terror. The forest threw everything it had at her to break her spirit. Visions of paradise, threats of violence, promises to reunite with her subtly changed team. Yet Victoria clung to her decision, a struggle of pain and effort that affirmed her humanity. Her ship's remnants had fallen in the dark, but as the alien sun began to rise, the twisted canopy cast queer shadows around her. It was hardly recognizable, smothered in alien vines and blossoming with bioluminescent growths. The forest had taken it, and it was part of the forest itself. Victoria walked to the comms array and secretly prayed that Morrison's equipment was still functioning. The area was overgrown with alien vegetation, but the basic elements were still operable. Cooperating with frantic haste, she was able to back-build a distress beacon. What she wrote was simple. Keppel of 442b is hostile. Planet-wide predatory consciousness. Do not attempt colony mission. Recommend quarantine. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, sole survivor. As she completed the transmission, Victoria felt the push of the forest consciousness against her for the last time. It showed her images of her teammates, gloriously at peace in their changed forms. It gave her one more opportunity to come to them, to forsake her pathetic human nature and embrace the pure. Victoria looked around the alien paradise that spread out around her, the beautiful, monstrous world that had taken her entire team from her. She pondered the choice she had made, the price to stay human. Then she imagined the human colonies that would read her warning, the lives that would be saved by her sacrifice. She reflected on the generations of humanity that would always expand, change, select its own ways through the universe. I take humanity, she whispered in a last, desperate effort, and felt the alien mind recoil in defeat. So Victoria settled in to wait for rescue, encircled by foliage of an alien forest that would never give up the attempt to reclaim her. She was alone, but she was human, and that should have been enough. She had preserved her kind from a fate more terrible than intimate death, than the extinction of choice, the termination of growth, the forfeiture of all that made them human. The forest sighed around her, a beautiful, terrible thing that assured paradise for submission. But Victoria Hayes had already decided, the last human on a planet full of alien predators. She would always be human, no matter the price. And so days slipped by in this odd stalemate. Victoria managed on emergency rations as the forest maintained its relentless siege on her brain. The alien consciousness had never fully ceased its effort to seduce her, to show her back projected. Fantasies of her remade team, living in harmonious brunch. But Victoria stood her ground, grounded by her decision to remain a human. The rescue arrived on the 7th day. There was a military ship in the alien sky, and the engines boomed surrounding the forest's intense, bioluminescent pattern. Victoria peered through the interlocking foliage at the ship settling into a clearing. Safe from some of the predatory greenery, the rescue party moved in slowly and wore entire environmental suits, along with equipment that would counter electromagnetic interference. They discovered Victoria in the shattered remains of her ship, buried in alien forest but still humaner looking than not. "Hey, Hayes," a rescue team leader shouted through his suit's external speakers. "We received your distress signal. Are you injured? Weak from days of little food and constantly having tortured her mind, Victoria slowly rose. "I'm human," she said, and her words had a significance the rescue team could scarcely imagine. "I chose to remain human." With that knowledge in her mind, with her team having betrayed her one by one, Victoria accepted it as they dragged her through the alien flora of that woodland for that final glance of her former team's new forms. They looked after her leaving being a thing of melancholy grief, for they were altered for all time by their decision to give themselves to the consciousness of the woods. Victoria's choice had been different. She had gone with struggle over peace, loneliness over connection, humanity over perfection, and in refusing that choice, she had saved her species, all of them, from a beautiful fate, as the rescue vessel ascended, bearing Victoria from the world that had somehow sought to claim her soul. The forest murmured its farewell. It left her forever marked, scarred by the decisions she had made and the price she had paid. But she was human. She had chosen to live as a human, and that was the key. Victoria's report would result in Kepler-4 for 2b being quarantined in the months ahead. The planet would be declared off-limits to colonists, its beautiful, terrible secret ensured by the sacrifice of one woman who, in the face of paradise, chose humanity. Victoria Hayes came back a hero, but she swallowed the decision. For the rest of her days, she had preserved her kind, but at a price barely anyone could appreciate. She had chosen to be human in a cosmos of softer, simpler surrenders, and each night, in her dreams, she could still hear the alien forest calling her, promising peace and togetherness and the end of the battle of life. But Victoria Hayes made her decision, and she would take it to the grave. She was a human. She would stay a human and shed damned all of what it took. That was her gift to the world, the bull-headed exquisite refusal to be perfect, to cooperate with any perfection, to stand in a world as beautiful and cruel and uncertain as this one, and to choose anyway. She was proof that the most powerful thing about humanity was not its technology, not its weapons, not even its numbers, its many, many numbers, but the fact that we could choose, that we could decide on our own damn direction, even if that direction led us into shadow and fire. To Victoria Hayes, who valued humanity above paradise, her simple defiance on behalf of her species had saved her kind from bondage to the humanity they had already mastered. And in the end, that was sufficient.